I'll ask you a few questions before we turn to our audience. So Luke, I can imagine one of the best parts about your role is that you travel the world going to G7 summits, talking to other leaders around the world. And in your experience, when you're talking to them and sort of almost making that pitch for why invest in the UK, what do you sort of think is most important for how we attract business investment into the UK economy?
Well, first of all, good afternoon, Ray, and good afternoon, everyone. And it's a pleasure to be here, and I've had my head down all weekend writing the autumn statement on Wednesday, but it's not yet finalised, so there's still time for that last-minute idea that if you want to put it into my head, I'm sure you've got a few. Look, I feel a lot more positive about the UK economy than I did a year ago when I came in. And, you know, the biggest reason is because we've managed to halve inflation, but, you know, 11.1% inflation, which it was this time last year, that is, you know, terrifyingly high, and we had to do some very difficult things to get it back under control. But I hope now people can see we're making progress on that. I'll be focusing on growth, which is why it's been very useful to engage with you. We can start to shake off some of the defeatism and pessimism about the UK economy. So what do I say when I'm talking to people overseas about the UK? Well, I say, what are the industries that are going to grow the fastest in the 21st century? I say those are the sectors that the UK is the strongest. So I don't think many people appreciate just how successful our tech industry is, becoming the third largest in the world last year after the United States and China. Life science, advanced manufacturing, clean energy, creative industries, all areas of tremendous success, on top of areas where we've been successful for many years, like financial services. And I think, you know, last year, if I throw my mind back to that very challenging autumn statement, I took the risk of saying, look, I want us to be the world's next Silicon Valley. I was expecting quite a lot of ridicule when I said that. But I think people understand what we've got in this country that gives us a chance of doing that is we've got, outside America, the world's best universities, and outside America, the world's best financial services. And that gives us something special. So I think we are very well poised as a country in the areas that we would want to be strong in, and we've now got to go for it.
Absolutely, and look, we're not short of ideas. You'll have already seen our 30-page autumn statement submission with, you know, packed full of ideas, I think, from our members. But maybe just building on that a bit, what you just set out there in terms of that pitch for the UK economy. I think at the Conservative Party conference at Business Day, you talked quite compellingly about, you know, the UK being a good place to start a business, but one of the challenges, you know, particularly is when we compare ourselves to the US, is how do we ensure it is a great place to scale up businesses in every region of the UK? Because as you say, we have, you know, we're really lucky in the UK to have world-leading universities in every region of the UK, but we really need to think about how we get that innovation ecosystem working in all regions and that scale up. What would you see as how we do that?
Well, I think if we want to be the world's next Silicon Valley, then we've got to crack scale up. Compared to a decade ago, I think most people would say if you've got a good idea in a, you know, one of those growing sectors, it's not difficult to find up to 5 million to kind of get your business off the ground. That used not to be the case, but I think that has changed because of EIS, SEIS, VCTs, and so on. But if you're trying to get a business from 20 million to, say, 500 million cap, it's still too hard, and you're more likely to get investment from a Canadian pension fund than a British pension fund. And I do think that we've got the second biggest pension fund ecosystem in the world, but for various historic reasons, there are too many barriers that prevent them investing in some of the biggest domestic opportunities. So the Mansion House Pension Fund reforms are designed to address that. I will explain in the autumn statement how we're going to conclude that process. But I also think there are lots of other things that we can do in terms of removing supply-side barriers to growth. But the exam question is, Demis Hassabis, the greatest British tech entrepreneur you've never heard of, an absolutely brilliant guy. What would it take to persuade the Demis Hassabis of the future not to sell out his deep mind to Google, but actually to grow it into a multi-billion pound company floated on the London stock market, able to access all the capital he needs? Now, I think we can do that, but we've got to do the work together.
Yeah, and look, I think it was good to see, a couple of weeks ago around the AI summit that UK seeking to try and lead some of the development of that regulation. But look, as we think back, and I think we've talked about some of the areas where the UK can really lead the world, but we have to face into some of the challenges. So, and obviously as a chief economist, once a chief economist, and never quite leaves you. But productivity growth in the UK has flatlined since 2008. And there's a danger we're stuck in this dismal decade for living standards in the UK. And I think one of the messages we've been trying to say as we look forward is we need next year not to be a lost opportunity for growth here in the UK. So why do you think as a country and business community we haven't made more progress on really driving productivity growth?
Well, here's a fascinating thing. I mean, our productivity is 15% lower than Germany's. So broadly speaking, it takes Germans 4 days to make something. It takes us 5 days. We need to address that. But despite that handicap of a lower productivity, we've actually grown faster than Germany since 2010. Why is that? Well, I think the reason is because we out-innovate Germany. They have higher productivity, but we have our innovation industries that have done incredibly well. That is the period in which we built this huge technology industry that we didn't have before. So the way I look at that is I say, well, if we could fix the productivity, we'd be absolutely unstoppable because we've got the innovation as well. And why do we have that productivity gap? Well, it's not because Germans work harder than us. If anything, we work longer hours than them. It is because of issues around skills, where our university sector is stronger than Germany's, but for the 50% of school leavers who don't go to university, the Germans have a better system of technical education, and we need to learn from that. And part of that is what Rishi Sunak is talking about in terms of people doing maths and English to 18, because we need to improve our basic skills. But part of that is that we have less capital investment as a proportion of our GDP. Germany, France, and the United States, between them, average about 2% more invested in GDP every year. So what you will see on Wednesday, without going into individual measures, is a whole range of measures designed to unlock business investment and close that gap with countries like France, Germany, and the United States. And one of those I talked about yesterday, which is making it easier for people to get planning approved. We're going to completely overhaul the planning system. We're going to say local authorities have to meet statutory deadlines, or they give you guys your money back and then have to process the application free of charge. We've got to unlock access to the grids as well. So a lot of supply-side measures to boost that investment.
Look, and I think it's great to hear business investment being front and centre of that. And obviously, we're hoping to see full expensing made permanent as part of setting out a more permanent landscape around that. But I think touching on that, the sort of energy transition and that move to a greener economy, when we look to some of what's happening around the world, we see in the US, Biden and IRA and the Inflation Reduction Act, and obviously the EU have their Green New Deal. What do you think the UK really needs to do to make sure that we secure that green growth market? So something we think is really important at CBI.
Well, first of all, we should recognise we've done really well in that sector. I mean, over the last decade, we built the third largest renewable sector in Europe after Germany and Norway. We're by far Europe's largest producer of offshore wind energy. And that's why we've identified clean energy as one of our 5 strategic industries that we absolutely know we have to back. I mean, very simple reason, we have to double the amount of electricity that we generate by 2050. Let me talk about the business voice. First of all, I have really valued the interactions that I've had with you and the CBI and indeed many of the people in this room, and we're very grateful for that. This is a moment when, having made progress on inflation, we want to focus on the long-term growth of the British economy. You are all business people. You understand that Rome wasn't built in a day. We're not going to get there immediately. I won't be able to do every single thing on the list that you've asked me to do. But I hope you will look at Wednesday's measures and apply to those measures the same definitions of success as you would apply to your own businesses. And that is to say, what matters is not the headlines you grab on the next day, but are these the measures that are going to make a real difference in the next 5 years? And I think that we have to recognize, if we're going to catch up with German levels of productivity, if we're going to back our scale-ups so that they're like Silicon Valley and they can access capital as easily as that, if we're going to unlock the incredible potential that I really do believe we have, this is a 5 or 10 year project. But for me, the inspiration, I always think the Chancellor that inspired me the most is the person who sadly died this year, Lord Lawson. But what Nigel Lawson did, amongst many things, was through Big Bang, he left this country with the City of London. And it wasn't in his lifetime. Oh, sorry, it wasn't while he was Chancellor. But that legacy, the taxes generated by our financial services sector, pays for half the cost of running the NHS. Now, if we can do the right things on Wednesday so that we unlock that potential for 5 or 10 years' time, I think we can do something really amazing for the future of this country. And that's what I want to do.